What if I told you that motivation is the wrong thing to chase? What if the secret to becoming unstoppable is learning how to move forward even when motivation disappears? Imagine waking up one morning completely exhausted. Your body feels heavy, your mind is foggy. The goals that once excited you suddenly feel meaningless. You look at your plans, your unfinished work, your dreams, and think, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and you feel the same. This is where most people surrender. Not because they are incapable, but because they have built their lives around a feeling that was never meant to be permanent: motivation. The Stoics understood something radically different. They knew that motivation comes and goes, but discipline can remain. And once you understand that distinction, exhaustion no longer has to be the end of your progress. There was a man who understood this better than almost anyone. His name was Marcus Aurelius. He was an emperor of Rome, surrounded by power, wealth, responsibility, war, political pressure, and personal difficulties. Yet in his private writings, he repeatedly reminded himself to get up and fulfill his duty. He wasn't waiting to feel inspired. He wasn't waiting for the perfect morning. He wasn't negotiating with his emotions. He understood that life does not ask you how motivated you feel. Life asks you what you will do with the circumstances in front of you. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the resistance we feel when leaving our bed, asking himself why a human being should complain about doing the work he was created to do. Think about that. An emperor had to remind himself to get out of bed. The lesson is profound. Feeling resistance does not mean something is wrong with you. Resistance is part of being human. The mistake is believing that you must eliminate resistance before you can act. Modern culture tells you to find your passion, find your purpose. Wait until you feel inspired. Build a morning routine that makes you feel unstoppable. Watch another motivational video. Read another book. Create another plan. And for a few hours you feel powerful. But eventually, the feeling disappears. Then you conclude that something is wrong with you. The Stoics would disagree. Epictetus taught that we should focus our attention on what lies within our control. Your feelings are not always under your control. Your energy fluctuates. Your mood changes. Your circumstances shift. Other people disappoint you. Your plans fail. But your response remains something you can influence. And this is where Stoic motivation begins. You don't need to control how you feel before you act. You need to control what you do despite how you feel. Imagine two people standing at the bottom of a mountain. Both are exhausted. Both have doubts. Both have experienced failure. One says, "I'll climb when I feel motivated." The other says, "I will take one step." The first person may feel better for a moment because they have removed the pressure, but the mountain doesn't move. The second person takes one step, then another, and another, perhaps slowly, perhaps painfully, but eventually, they are no longer at the bottom. This is the Stoic secret. You don't need endless motivation. You need a reason strong enough to survive the disappearance of motivation. Seneca understood this battle with the mind. He warned about the danger of constantly postponing life, because the person who is always waiting for the right moment eventually discovers that the right moment never came. Every time you say, "I'll start tomorrow," you are making a small agreement with weakness, and repeated agreements become habits. Habits become character, and character eventually becomes destiny. But here's the important part. Stoicism is not about forcing yourself to work endlessly until you collapse. It is not glorified exhaustion. It is not pretending you're a machine. The Stoics understood rest too. There is a difference between being exhausted and being unwilling. Sometimes your body genuinely needs recovery. Sometimes your mind needs silence. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop, breathe, sleep, and recover. Wisdom means knowing the difference. The problem is that many people use exhaustion as an excuse when what they actually need is direction. If you are exhausted because you are doing meaningless things, more motivation won't save you. If you are exhausted because you're trying to impress people, more discipline won't solve the problem. If you are exhausted because you are chasing goals that don't belong to you, pushing harder may only take you farther in the wrong direction. The Stoics would first ask a deeper question: what are you serving? Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, developed a philosophy centered around living according to reason and nature. The goal was not to become someone who feels nothing. The goal was to become someone whose actions are guided by what is truly valuable, rather than by every passing emotion. And that changes everything. Because when your life has a clear principle, you no longer need to ask yourself every morning, "Do I feel like doing this?" You ask, "Is this the person I want to become?" That question is much more powerful. You may not feel like exercising, but if you value strength, you take the first step. You may not feel like studying, but if you value wisdom, you open the book. You may not feel like working on your dream, but if you believe the work matters, you sit down and begin. You may be afraid, you may be tired, you may be frustrated, and you can still move. This is what makes Stoic discipline so powerful. It separates action from emotion. Think about the soldier standing before battle. Courage does not mean the soldier feels no fear. Courage means fear does not receive the final vote. The same principle applies to your everyday life. You don't need to defeat every negative emotion. You simply need to stop allowing every emotion to become an instruction. Your mind says, "I'm tired." You listen. But then you ask, what kind of tired am I? If you genuinely need rest, rest without guilt. If you're simply uncomfortable, take one small action. If you're afraid, take the smallest step that fear is trying to prevent. If you're bored, continue anyway. If you failed yesterday, begin again today. This is how motivation becomes almost irrelevant. Because your system no longer depends on motivation. And here's where Marcus Aurelius gives us another powerful idea. Focus on the task immediately in front of you. Not the entire mountain. Not the next 6 months. Not everything that could go wrong. Just the next action. When you're exhausted, your brain tries to make the future feel enormous. 1,000 unfinished tasks suddenly become one giant monster. And because the mountain looks impossible, you freeze. The Stoic response is simple: shrink the battlefield. Don't ask, how am I going to completely transform my life? Ask, what is the right thing to do in the next 10 minutes? 10 minutes of focused work. 10 minutes of exercise. 10 minutes of reading. 10 minutes of cleaning. 10 minutes of silence. 10 minutes can change the direction of a day. And enough changed days can change the direction of a life. This is why you should stop measuring yourself only by dramatic victories. The Stoics valued consistency because character is built through repeated choices. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your character. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when nobody is watching, you become more trustworthy to yourself. And eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop needing motivation because you have evidence. Evidence that you can act. Evidence that you can endure. Evidence that you can begin again. Evidence that your emotions do not control you. And that confidence is far more powerful than temporary excitement. Seneca once emphasized that suffering often becomes greater in anticipation than in reality. We imagine how difficult something will be, and that imagination becomes another burden. But once we begin, we discover that the first step was often harder psychologically than physically. So when you are exhausted, don't demand that yourself become extraordinary. Demand one honest action. One page. One push-up. One paragraph. One phone call. 1 hour without distraction. One decision to stop making excuses. The Stoic doesn't say, "I must feel powerful today." The Stoic says, "I must act according to my values today." And there is a profound freedom in that. Because motivation is emotional weather. Some days the sky is clear. Some days there is a storm. Some days you wake up full of energy. Other days you feel like you have nothing left. But your values can remain constant. The sun doesn't need your motivation to rise. The seasons don't ask whether you feel inspired to change. Nature simply moves according to its principles. And Stoicism asks you to do something similar. Establish your principles, then live by them. There will be days when you fail. There will be mornings when you break your routine. There will be moments when you choose comfort. Don't turn one failure into an identity. Epictetus reminds us that what matters is how we respond to what happens. If you fall, return. If you lose momentum, restart. If you make a mistake, learn. The goal is not perfection. The goal is returning to the path. Again. And again. and again. That is the real meaning of endless motivation. It isn't that you never lose motivation. It is that you never permanently lose your direction. You can stop. You can rest. You can stumble. You can even walk backward for a while. But you know where you are going. And when the storm passes, you begin again. So tonight, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I doing that actually matters? What am I doing only because I want approval? And what is one small action I can take tomorrow, even if I don't feel motivated? Write the answers down. Then tomorrow morning, don't wait for inspiration. Get up. Take a breath. And do the first thing. Not because you feel like it. Because you decided. That is the difference between a life controlled by emotion and a life guided by character. The world will constantly tempt you to chase comfort. Your phone will offer distraction. Your mind will offer excuses. Fear will tell you to wait. Fatigue will tell you that you can't. But there is a quieter voice inside you. The voice that says, continue. Not forever. Not perfectly. Just continue. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson the Stoics left us. You don't become strong by feeling strong. You become strong by acting with strength when you don't feel strong. You don't become disciplined when discipline feels easy. You become disciplined when you keep your word during the moments when breaking it would be easier. And you don't discover who you are when life is comfortable. You discover who you are when everything inside you says, stop, and you calmly answer, one more step. So if you're exhausted right now, don't hate yourself for it. Rest if you need to rest. But when it is time to rise, rise. When it is time to work, work. When it is time to begin again, begin.